So why this whole thing about cultural competence, right? So I always say, as racialized and Aboriginal Canadians gain increasing space in society, cultural competence becomes more important. Canada, in many ways, is not becoming more diverse. Perhaps there are more peoples from different places coming here, but in terms of the numbers, Canada has always been a very diverse society. It's just that those people who represent cultural and racial diversity were so marginalized in the society that no thought had to be given to their issues. Right. And so that's changing. And so all of the systems, including legal systems, need to be more competent. Right. Principles of cultural competence are being recognized legally as foundational to your practice. Okay. So principles of cultural competence are being recognized as foundational and being read into your standards of practice. Right? So this is not an idea of people from what they used to call us the tissue ministries outside of law. Like, social work and psychology, the tissue ministries, outside of law. It's being written into Canadian standards of competence for lawyers. And evidence of culturally specific location and context of crime has begun to be acknowledged as relevant in adjudication and sentencing. Okay? So this is particularly for you criminal folk. So let me, after the argument, let's talk about what is this cultural competence stuff. And I've been building a definition for that for the last 20 years, and it's in front of you now in its current format. So cultural competence refers to an ability to interact effectively with people of different cultures. That's bottom line. It's just about being able to bridge the gaps of difference. Right? And it comprises, I say, 4 essential capacities, though there's a list of 5 things here, and that's because this definition has been evolving. Okay. So, we need to understand our own cultural location. We need to understand the social and cultural reality in which we all live and work, cultivate appropriate attitudes, and generate and communicate across those cultural boundaries, and understand cultural oppression and demonstrate awareness and commitment to social justice. So when I think about cultural difference and understanding this cultural difference, I go to a mentor and dear friend of mine, Edwin Nichols, who's an industrial organizational psychologist who practices out of Washington, D.C. And he, helping us to understand cultural difference, developed a philosophical framework in which to understand the subtleties and the not-so-subtleties of cultural difference. Right? And so, thinking philosophically, he said, really, when you boil it all down, cultures differ philosophically in terms of their differing values, their different ways of knowing, and their different ways of figuring things out. Right? I won't get into the subtleties of the difference between logic and process, and how that's about reasoning in both the locations. But that's what he says. And I've been quite impressed that this model has been holding up pretty well. Okay. So this is his chart, which is the philosophical aspects of cultural difference. This is Nichols' model. If I were to be simplistic and just look at one aspect of this, how values differ, okay, between European peoples and African peoples. Now, I have to be very careful because I don't want you to think that these 5 cultural locations are now the 5 neat boxes in which you can just drop and categorize people in. This is the ancient and historical origins of these various locations, and people today tend to be touched by different cultures, and so their presentation might be a little less boxy, if I can put it that way, right? So a European North American who is a naturalist and feminist. Might not fit neatly in that box, right? Right? But if we were to look just at the traditional, ancient, and historical kinds of high value, Dr. Nichols explains how historically, as peoples were developing in different locations and different climates with different social structures, that they organized in ways where value systems developed differently. And in Northern European kinds of contexts, the relationship between the person or the member and the object became the highest value. And you need to understand that object here is not just a thing like this, but an objective, a thing that must be achieved, acquired, or delivered. In African cultures, as those cultures developed, the highest value emerged as the relationship between members. Okay? I'm not going to do the whole chart because that would be, that'd be a week's worth of coursework, right? And so when these two cultures evolved in that way, there was this difference in values that has influenced then how the cultures interact. Okay? I always demonstrate this, kind of comically but dramatically, by describing how I used to work on Spring Garden Road, and I would walk everywhere to go to my meetings downtown. I haven't, it's a way to keep from being an even bigger man in my field, is to walk to my meetings. And I used to have to schedule time to walk from one building to another building because I would run into a half a dozen people I know, and because of my cultural location and my personal kind of need to touch base with and connect with and reconnect with the people I encountered, it took me a long time to get from this building to that building. And I've always found it humorous to compare that with my white colleagues, some of whom I would pass on the street, and they were very objective-oriented. And their way of commuting from meeting to meeting by foot is this way. Hey, hi, how are you doing? Because the need to arrive on time, to fulfill the objective, is more important than nurturing the relationship between you and the people you pass on the street. Highest value relationship versus higher value objective. Which one is right? It's fool's gambit, right? Neither is right. They're just different. Right? Are you with me there? So it's the subtleties of cultural difference which helps you to understand that when you're working with your clients, you cannot assume that what they want to see occur in the matter that they bring to you for legal resolution it will not necessarily make sense to you because their values may differ widely from your values. See what I'm saying? Because you come from different locations. Bottom line, people are different, and we cannot treat different people as if we were all the same. Okay? Now, you need to understand that this has gone through an evolution. Now, I'm going to move over to this board here and see if this marker works. I'm usually neurotic enough that I take my markers out of my own bag over there. I've got whiteboard markers because I don't trust these. Oh, look, they didn't fail me today. Isn't that great? But you got to understand that when I say people are different and we can't treat all people the same, a lot of people bristle and that doesn't sound right to me. And that's because historically in North America, we went from a place where people are different, right? In fact, we used to believe that some people were people and some people were non-people. And so acknowledging difference can be a little uncomfortable for us, right? Then we went to, we were 3/5 a person, right? I'm not sure who that was. Was it right? And then we went through the civil rights movement where the whole idea was that no, we're all the same, right? And that became the rallying cry for the pursuit of justice, right, was the idea of equality. But now we've kind of passed through that, and we're now in an area where we're recognizing that people are different. And now what we're seeking is equity. Okay? See? So when I say people are different, some people bristle because they think I'm talking about that stuff down there. And they're saying, oh, no, I've evolved to the place where I've accepted that we're equal and that we're all the same. And I'm saying, good for you. That's great. That's yesterday's news. Right? So that's where we're at now. Does that make sense to you? All right, so you're with me. If you're still stuck because you think you're right, people are different, and you're back here, you're not going to graduate, so I'm not going to worry about you. They don't still let those guys graduate, do they? Do they? I encounter them occasionally, but they're long in the tooth. No, seriously though. Social, cultural, and historical context. So the other part of the definition is this context. You need to know the context, right? You need to understand that people exist in a social context, and that in North America, the question of diversity is fraught with complicated and tragic history. Oh my, it's miserable. And that, when you think about what has happened here, right? Enslavement of Africans, attempted genocide of First Nations, global strife resulting in transglobal immigration, all these kinds, and here we are. You need to have a working knowledge of that in order to be culturally competent. Okay. Carol Alward, in her reading that is in your package, she talks about this concept of spotting the issues. You cannot spot issues in a case that might have some relevance around this whole question of cultural competence if you have no concept of the context. Right? And then appropriate attitudes. Knowledge, attitudes, or values and skills is what we're talking about here, right? And I just read the slide. This is Canada. You can't have inappropriate attitudes. You just can't. And if you do hold them, they won't work for you very much longer. Right? It's social revolution by demographic shift. That's what's happening in Canada today. Right? So cross-cultural communication is a complex study in what we call in sociology cultural hermeneutics, which means you can't understand what I'm saying unless you understand my context. Right? And Elmer Holenstein made this quote that I love: before meaningless, unnatural, non-human, or immature behavior or corresponding values are attributed to a people of another culture, it is better to begin by doubting the adequacy of one's own judgment and knowledge. Right? I like to paraphrase Holenstein by saying, before you think that I'm crazy, you should consider the possibility that you're stupid. The social justice piece. We must demonstrate an awareness of how structural issues affect our sector, its members, and our clients, and demonstrate an active program aimed at addressing systemic issues of exclusion and oppression. I do not believe that it is possible to be culturally competent without having raised up inside of you a commitment to social justice. I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible. If you pretend at being culturally competent and are not actively engaged in the practice of social justice, then you just have words. And that will show in your practice. It's kind of like, carrying around a gym membership doesn't make you physically fit. That's kind of, I just stopped paying for the membership. I'm not headed in that direction. Let's just call a spade, right? But at least that's honest, right? At least that's honest, right? But you cannot propose to be culturally competent and still engage in, participate in all of the structures of oppression and discrimination that continue to exist in our society. And then the cultural competence how. I encourage organizations to do organizational assessments of cultural competence and develop organizational plans around cultural competence, employ and support culturally competent practitioners, make available systemic coaching, provide and support continuing education, all of these things that the Barrister Society here has been championing and doing.